Hello, friends, and welcome to Wisdom Nuggets Unlocked, the show that brings you exclusive interviews with highly successful people in their respective fields who made a mark in their world. My name is David, and besides my own newsletter, Wisdom Nuggets, I'm a blogger and influencer and currently study law in Seoul, South Korea. With that being said, today's guest is really exciting. She worked in various fields over her lifetime. First, she worked at Samsung Electronics for several years. Then she transmitted into being a bartender, and now she's partner at Seoul Ventures. We actually interviewed Joe Lim, the founder of Seoul Ventures, last week. So if you want to check that out, please go back and click the link in the description below. So thank you so much for joining us today, Marta Allina.
Hello, hi. Just call me Martha. It's okay.
So Marta, can you please elaborate a little bit more about yourself, why you dropped the Samsung Electronics job, which is a very safe job, high income, to work as a bartender, and then again transmit to work for South Ventures and becoming a partner of South Ventures?
Oh gosh, where do I begin? Okay, so kind of to backtrack a little bit, I'm originally from Poland. I came to Korea this time around 15 years ago as an exchange student. What was supposed to be an exchange semester has turned into 15 years living in Korea. I did my grad school here nearby your university in Yonsei. After I graduated, like you mentioned, I worked for 4 years in Samsung Electronics and Networks business, where I marketed and sold the infrastructure that makes your cell phones work. So all the 4G, LTE, base stations, antennas, that sort of stuff. And then I moved on. Actually, I didn't move on. I actually burned out completely. I got really depressed, mentally and physically sick, and I had to leave Samsung. It was very painful for me, and I vowed never to work at a desk job again. At the beginning, what it looked like was that I decided to become a bartender, and I worked for over a year as a bartender, where I got scouted by startups, then got working in accelerators, VCs, startups themselves. And somewhere along the way, I realized that the Korean startup scene doesn't have much of a community. It's not founders for founders, it's government for government, pretty much. And to kind of address that need and that dysfunction of the ecosystem, I set up Seoul Startups, which is, as you said, has actually over 4,000 members at the moment, and is the biggest international startup community in Korea. I also am a partner at South Ventures, which is a Busan-based accelerator and VC focused on impact investments and social impact bonds. I am also a country representative for a company called German Entrepreneurship, which supports German startups to discover the Korean market and vice versa, Korean startups to discover German and other markets. I am involved in all those three projects at the same time. I don't limit myself to one thing, but they're all connected at the end of the day. So because I run Soul Startups, I'm a kind of an ecosystem builder. So I help companies like German Entrepreneurship connect with the right people, the right mentors, the right resources, et cetera, et cetera. And I also use the same set of skills pretty much to run South Ventures as well. I would even say I'm involved in more projects now than I was ever in Samsung. In Samsung, I just had one project to work on, and that's it. It was a combination of a lot of things. So in Korea, when I talk with a Korean person, I usually, when I tell them about my Samsung experience, the first thing I ask them, have you read the comic book or seen the drama called Miseng? Which is very famous here. Miseng literally translates as no life, and it's a drama about corporate life, pretty much, or how struggles in the corporate life. I pretty much had my own Miseng, so Samsung was pretty much my first grown up adult job. I didn't know better. I thought that everybody went through the same thing as I went through. I heard stories before about Samsung, but I thought it was over exaggerated. I was extremely proud to be part of Samsung. And it kind of got emphasized more when, as a new employee, I had to go through a new employee training, which pretty much is a brainwashing regime where you're pretty much drilled in the history and the values of Samsung. And on top of learning the Samsung dance and song and then dancing and singing in front of the executives. It's kind of like a cheerleader dance with a lot of jumping and waving. I wasn't very good, so I'm not gonna try to recreate it. But after that, after this, it's a really long process. So after 3 months of that, you're absolutely in love with Samsung, and you even tell everybody that I have blue blood because the Samsung colors are blue. So you go around saying you have blue blood. So I got dispatched into a division that was renowned for being super conservative and super military like, mostly because it used to be a public company. It used to be part of KT, and it got acquired by Samsung. So even Samsung Electronics itself is a combination of a lot of divisions, right? And each division, it's pretty much its own company, and they have a lot in common, but they do have some specific parts of their company culture that are unique to them. And so my division was very conservative and very military like, and it was also mostly men. In my team of 30 people, I was the only girl. On top of being the only foreigner, I was the only girl. So, but that wasn't like, being a girl wasn't a problem. I think the problem was, uh, well, so first of all, when I entered my division, the first thing I told everybody, I don't want to be treated differently because I'm a foreigner. Treat me like you would treat a Korean employee, and I'm going to work in Korean. And everybody was like, okay, fine, better for us, right? I think I wanted to blend in so badly that in the end, the biggest compliment that I ever got from my boss, like my team leader, was that in his eyes, I was not a woman and I was not a foreigner. See, that wasn't the problem. The problem with our division was that, yes, we had to work lots of late hours. Like, leaving before 10 was considered early. And you had to be back in the office by 8. Technically, you didn't, because we technically had flexible hours and we could go into the office anytime before 1 p.m. But our boss specifically said that you had to be before 8. And that didn't help that a lot of times after we were finished work, after 10, he would be, instead of sending us home, he would be like, oh, let's go and have a drink. And we would usually have drinks like until, well, I don't know, 3 a.m. in the morning. On top of that, it was a very stressful environment where it just became unbearable, the pressure and the stress and the constant yelling and calling names. You say, oh, it doesn't affect me. But if you hear that every single day, it takes a toll. And after 4 years, I realized that I was depressed. I didn't know what to do, obviously, because I wasn't going to self-diagnose myself. But I heard from a friend that there was a clinic on Samsung campus. There's a hospital, right? There has to be a hospital. There's several thousand people get sick. But what people don't know, and I discovered, was that on the top floor of that hospital, it's a small building, but on the top floor of the hospital, they have what is called 마음 건강 clinic, pretty much a mental health clinic with four full-time psychiatrists. At least at my time, there was a 3-month waiting list to get to see those. Obviously, Samsung as a company sees that there's a problem if they hire those psychiatrists. Instead of solving that problem, they are trying to put a band-aid on it. So I ended up seeing the psychiatrist for a year, secretly, without my colleagues knowing. And long story short, instead of getting better, it became worse and worse, to the point that the doctor said, look, if you don't go for a sick leave now, I'm not sure you're going to survive the next month. My first reaction was like, of course I cannot go on a sick leave. We're working on a project. My colleagues need me. And, I was really upset, but he managed to convince me. The thing is, in Korea and Korean companies, when you go on a sick leave, it's not that you just file a little paper to the HR and you're gone. You have to get a special permission from your direct supervisor. And they didn't know, right, that there was anything wrong with me. So I have to go to my VP with a very detailed account from the doctor of what's wrong with me and submit it to them, like give it to him. And thankfully, his reaction was great. Like he burst into tears and he was like, "Why didn't you tell me about this? I would have helped you." At the same time, looking back, it was like, why did I have to do that? Like, why did I have to like disclose so much details of my personal mental health to my boss, right? Before I went on a sick leave, every time I would leave my company really late at night, which was quite often, I would ask the neighborhood bartenders from a neighborhood bar to walk me home because my neighborhood was a little bit dodgy. So I became really friendly with them, and so they knew what I was going through. When they found out that I was on a sick leave, they were like, "Well, instead of just sitting at home, why don't you just come to the bar? You can help us out. We'll teach you fun stuff." I went there and I discovered that enjoyed bartending more than I enjoyed my work at Samsung. So after 3 months of sick leave, I went back to my boss and I was like, I'm sorry, but actually, I don't want to be here anymore. They thought had gone crazy. I think they still think I'm crazy. They were like, you're making a big mistake. You're going to regret this. How about we just move you to a different division? Like, you don't have to do this. And I was like, I already decided I cannot be here anymore.
What exactly was that bar?
I worked in a bar in Gangnam area, quite a fancy whiskey bar. Unfortunately, it's gone. Like a professional whiskey bar in Korea, not a sleazy night bar with ladies. Gangnam is renowned for having a lot of IT companies, a lot of financial companies, right? And a lot of our patrons were startup founders who now are pretty famous people. Obviously, when they saw a white girl bartending, they were like, "What? Hold on, what's your story, girl?" And I would tell them that, oh, I had a corporate job, I worked in Samsung, I left, now I'm a bartender. And they would get really interested, especially in my skill set, and would ask me to help them like a freelance, various marketing gigs here and there. And they would recommend me to other startup founders, and it kind of got passed around to the point that one day a guy from quite a well-known accelerator and a VC came and scouted me out, offered me a pretty good position. I hesitated, but I took it mostly because at that point I had also been running my own little bar. It had actually failed miserably for various reasons, and I was like, I need the money, and I can always go back to bartending, and I still believe I can go back to bartending. I'm waiting for that day to come. I'll just give it a go for now, and I always can come back.
Building a community is very important, but can you answer why it is so important nowadays to have a community, to build your own community?
Everybody needs a community, and it starts from the very basic of our social needs, uh, of of function. We're social beings, and we need other beings to function. uh, but it goes down to also businesses, but also ecosystems. And the reason with Soul Startups was actually that the reason I started Soul Startups was I was a manager for a program called K Startup Grand Challenge, which is a government run program to bring in foreign startups into Korea. And while running this program, I realized that there's no networking events in English, and the events that are there are nothing about the community. They're about just ticking off boxes, getting signatures, and reporting to the government. So I realized that the ecosystem is very government centric, not entrepreneur centric. And I realized that in order to give the voice to entrepreneurs, they need to be organized somehow. And one of the ways to organize them and give them a platform to voice their needs and help each other out would be a community. And so I started Soul Startups mostly for my friends, or the startups that I was taking care of at that time. And they started inviting other startups, and is it 6 years later, we're at 4,000 members.
We talked about why you should build your community. Can you elaborate on the how?
Right. So, first of all, there's no right or wrong answer with building a community. I would say more than being a science, it's an art. So, it's art with a lot of trial and error that you have to go through. Um, but pretty much the first thing you have to ask yourself when you're building a community is, what is the purpose of this community? What do we want to achieve? Because people don't gather for the mere act of gathering. There always has to be a purpose to that gathering, and the more defined that purpose is, the better you can organize everything else around that. So first of all, the purpose. Who do we want to come and gather? How do we want them to gather? And what online, offline, once a week, twice a week, all the time? What are some of the rules of our gathering? Are there any rules? Maybe there are not no rules. And yeah, and I would start from there. There is a framework that I use, that I, especially when I work with businesses that want to build communities, that I encourage to use. It's called a community canvas that kind of goes into very detail of all these elements that you need to build a community. But I would say it's good to fill it out and to revisit it from time to time. But at the end of the day, you have to be very flexible and very fluid with running your community. You have to be, it's like being a parent. You kind of have to be strict, but also not too strict. You have to be lenient, but not too lenient. It's like walking on a tightrope. It depends how complex you want the community to be. So if it's something like Seoul Startups, it's a little bit more complex, I guess, because we do a lot of things and a lot of functions. But it evolved from something very simple, which was just a Slack group to share events. The end. That was it. I would say with building a community, think for ahead 20 years what you want that community to achieve, but work up to those 20 years step by step. So start simple, but have that vision of those 20 years ahead of time. Somewhere along the way, you realize that, oh, we can add this, we can add that to the community. We can add more activities, we can add different members, we can do sub communities, but think big, but act small and simple.
So, where do you see your own community in 20 years?
In 20 years, I want Seoul Startups to be an international, well, it's already an international community, but like a global community. Uh, and of, I would say, 10,000 members. I'm being realistic. And organizing big events for with various big name organizations, and helping and kind of helping other countries build similar communities in their startup ecosystems.
What exactly do you mean by realistic? Because as I can see, you're growing very fast right now, aren't you?
Right, but I expect the curve to slow down soon, so that's why I'm being realistic.
Who are you currently collaborating with? Who are like the communities you're currently collaborating with?
We are connected already with a lot of ecosystems and communities in Asia. I work closely with Techstars community leaders. I don't know if you know Techstars. It's one of the leading accelerators from the US. They have a very strong community program. So well, we work with we don't work, but we are friends with a lot of communities um, with the APAC within the APAC region.
Thank you, Marta, so much for your time. Do you have any last remarks before we close this episode?
Definitely take care of yourself as an entrepreneur. Take care of yourself because if you don't come first before anything else, nobody's going to take care of you. You have to be the pillar, the strength behind your venture. And if you don't take good care of yourself, then everything will fail. And second of all, community building, it's very, very, very hard. It's harder than you think it is, but it's also very loads and loads of fun. And I encourage everyone to be part of it because it's a great way to connect with people.